Welcome to this module where we're going to start explaining the design of the executive branch as conceived by the founders in writing the Constitution. In this segment, we're going to take a look at how the Anti-Federalist opposed the presidency and some of the facets of the presidency. And then I'll make some recommendations on some Federalist papers that you might want to read or other segments that are available here. So when we look at the ratification of the U.S. Constitution after the Constitution was written, it goes to the states for ratification. The Anti-Federalists had been concerned about the power of the presidency. Now, needless to say, given the fact that we had essentially just been the victims of a strong executive power under George III in England, it wasn't surprising that people really had a kind of chilling effect on their feelings towards the idea of executive power. The most extreme example of the way that the states handled executive power was this Constitution of 1776 in Pennsylvania, which is considered to be a very radical constitution. It basically did not have a governor or a chief executive. Rather, because of the fear of investing too much power in one person, the Pennsylvania Constitution of 1776 created what was called the Supreme Executive Council, which was composed of 12 people, and it had a president and a vice president. But the idea was that this council would kind of execute the laws the same way as you might see a governor do, but that power was spread around to a lot of different people. And certainly in the Constitutional Convention, there was some discussion at the federal level that we would parcel out the power of the president to more than one person. That obviously didn't come to the fore. Interestingly enough, the Pennsylvania Constitution of 1776 proved to be pretty much unworkable. And by the time there was a new constitution in 1790, they moved towards a traditional single executive in the form of a governor. So that didn't pan out very well, right? So these were fears that we saw from the Anti-Federalists, and they had a number of specific worries that essentially we would have an aristocratic government run by someone who was a king-like person, and within a certain amount of time that the president would become the equivalent of a dictator or ruler or king. So the idea of a unity of the executive, that one person would be invested with too much power, was at the heart of their argument. Second of all, probably the most important power that we recognize today for the president is the ability to be able to veto legislation, because it injects the president into the legislative process in Congress. And the Anti-Federalists were concerned about this power and were pretty much worried about the fact that why should one individual have the ability to be able to stop legislation that had been passed by a large representative body of the people. The third thing that the Anti-Federalists were concerned about was the idea of the president being the commander-in-chief, having the power basically to be able to run the military. And they were concerned that this would lead to a military dictatorship, with the president being able to settle difficulties between the president and Congress, or potentially the Supreme Court, through the use of military force. They also were concerned that the 4-year term was too long. In our original Constitution, we didn't have any amount of term limits for the president. So there was the belief that the president could continue to get reelected and ultimately would then assume power as a ruler that was undemocratic. The pardoning power was of concern as well. The belief was that the president, through the use of the pardon power, could get involved in all kinds of shenanigans to help out their cronies and then pardon those people after they had sought gain and kickbacks and so forth and dishonest government. And then finally, the vice president, who's rarely ever thought of in the context of being all that important in American politics, the Anti-Federalists were kind of worried about the concept of the vice president being the president of the United States Senate. And that, in their minds, violated the concept of separation of power. So these 6 things were concerns that the Anti-Federalist had concerning the power of the presidency. And what we see is that Alexander Hamilton comes back in the Federalist Papers in Federalist 69, 70, 71, and 73, and addresses some of the main issues associated with the Anti-Federalist fear of too much power within the executive branch. So it's well worth either watching continuing modules here about Hamilton's discussions in those Federalist Papers, or else reading them yourself.